Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Dianne Burkhart. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. Today is June 11th, 2025, and I have got such an incredible episode for you today. And honestly, I am not even sure how to begin to describe my guest today, because if I accurately describe him, you would think that he was a fictional character in some action adventure movie or novel, that this person could not be real. I mean, the things that he has done are just amazing. So I'm not going to go into a lot of blather right now. I'm just going to go straight to the interview and let you hear about all of the incredible things that this person has done from the man himself. Please welcome to Book Banter with Dianne Burkhart, the incredible Miles Spencer. Now, normally the way that I like to start my interviews is I have our guests tell people who they are and what they do. But I think from reading your biography, it might be shorter to tell people what you don't do, because it seems like you do a lot.
Well, I wake up early, perhaps. I like to say I'm just a curious kid from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was always asking my parents who, what, why, where, when. Great way to drive your parents crazy, by the way.
Yeah.
But it led to pretty perhaps healthy way to approach the world and learn more, always be curious. And so that's led me out of Pittsburgh as far as everywhere around the world. But it started at boarding school in Connecticut. And it's led me to learn a couple of languages, some better than others. It's led me to paint watercolors, and some better than others. So it's one thing I remind people of is results vary, even when it comes to the startups that I've had the good fortune of starting and building and selling, and some of them that went nowhere. Results vary, but I've remained curious throughout. Likewise, yeah.
Now, you actually started out in tech.
That's true. You can argue I'm still in it with the break for COVID. I bought an Apple IIe computer extremely early in the process. I love the fact that they had typography and they could do a lot of things with a spreadsheet as well. So back in the day, it fascinated me. And I think the reason was it was tech that made humanity a little better. It was tech that made doing my job a little faster and a little more efficient. And we've come a long way from the Apple IIe to today. But I love finding these little bits of tech that, again, make humanity a little better. So one example would be, if you remember Steve Jobs, when he first announced the iPhone, it was a camera, a music player, and a phone, all in one device. That was an amazing moment. And in that moment, my thesis was, well, no one's going to pay for this stuff by subscription. So it's going to be advertising that supports it. Why not create a mobile ad network that would support all of the content that was being created? And that was a company that went on to have a couple hundred employees and 50 million of capital. And it made humanity a little better by not having to pay for your content. Now, the flip side of that is that the exchange was a hit of dopamine every time you went to a social network or every time you opened up your phone. And now those problems are coming home to roost. Yeah, exactly. So,
is that where your Dorito effect comes in?
Yeah, yes. We need to develop something in tech that will benefit humanity when it comes to little hits of dopamine, i.e., the Dorito effect.
I think there needs to be like an automatic timer that it just like shuts. Okay, you've done enough doom scrolling. Stop. Look around you. Get up. Go talk to a person.
Well, there's a new app I like. I'm not gonna remember the name, unfortunately, but it does set a timer. And after 20 minutes of X or 20 minutes of Y, you have to get down and give me 50 push-ups if you want to continue.
Ah, I
So
need that.
it, act- it actually forces exercise or some physical behavior as a counterweight to time spent. I like that.
Yeah, definitely. Luckily, it's like I do have a dog and he does come in, every couple of hours and wants to go for a walk. So that's my timer. But I think one on my computer in front of my face would work too.
That's pretty funny, yes.
How did you get involved with Money Hunt?
Wow, now you're going in the Wayback Machine. Here's the story. It keeps getting better every time I tell it. It's about 25 years old. I had left Wall Street. I was involved with a couple of gentlemen from Lyndhurst, New Jersey, young gentlemen, 28 years old. They had just sold their business and they wanted to invest in other consumer products businesses. This was the beginning of .com, real exciting time. And everybody else that had a fund had $100 million to invest. And we failed to raise any money from anybody else. So the gentleman had a few $1 million. We decided to do earlier stage deals because we could write smaller checks, but we'd take much bigger risks. And then it came to pass that we realized we had to get deals in the door. How are you going to do that? Well, I had gone to France as an exchange student. I had watched a show called The Entrepreneurs from a scoundrel of a man named Bernard Tapie, separate story. And you can look it up. And I mentioned this to my friends. So we could have this show where entrepreneurs come on, pitch their ideas. We can give them thumbs up or thumbs down, and everybody will send us their business plan. To which they said, sounds just crazy enough to be right. Let's give it a shot. Wayne and Garth from Wayne's World happened to be popular at the time. And I realized that Cablevision and cable access was a way to get a studio for $500. So we did. And I co-hosted the show with a lawyer by the name of Cliff Ennico. I was the one that wanted to do everything. He was the one that wanted to do nothing. And we've shot a few shows, very Wayne's World. And I got the tape in the hands of an executive at Warner Brothers Television by the name of Scott Carlin. And he said, why don't you come out here? I want to talk to you. I said, sure. So I went out and he said, this is how to actually syndicate this show and own the whole thing, just like Oprah would go on to do, just like Dr. Phil would go on to do.
Hmm.
And so Money Hunt ended up on 230 stations in the US and 13 countries overseas
Wow.
because we did it one at a time. So average audience aggregate for a week would be about 1.2 million in the US. And because of that, we got a lot of business plans. And it was a funny story. We had the, premiere of the season. Now we're on public television. We're down in Philadelphia. I invited all my every BC friend I could think of. I invited down to the premiere party. And they're all asking, like, how do we get on this show? I'm like, oh, I don't know. You'd have to talk to the producers, knowing full well that was us. How do you get selected to host the show? I said they choose based on hair, right? I have good hair. Anyways, we did 150 episodes. We got a lot of business plans because of it. I hosted the show together with Cliff all the way through the seventh season. And then after the .com crash, it continued for 2 or 3 years after that. And then that was it. But it was a great run. Obviously, I developed my storytelling muscles, which continue today. But it was really about shutting up and letting the guest tell their story. That's why we got so many companies to come on the show. And it has been called the predecessor to Dragon's Den and Shark Tank, which is good for like one cup of coffee. I tell the story, and that's about it. So that is the story of Money Hunt up to now.
But that did lead to your first publication.
It did. Very good. So Money Hunt's 27 Rules for Starting a Business was written while I was the host of Money Hunt. It's kind of easy to get a deal for writing a book when you're a host of a show. One thing I insisted on, and you see that in the following books, is I refused to make it nonfiction because as a storyteller, I'd have to like check facts.
Hmm.
My stories go much better if there's not a fact checker running behind me ruining it. So all of these stories are, I think the word is a portmanteau or a gumbo of different characters and different experiences, which I just assign to this person or that person. So it's like a fireside chat, sitting around having marshmallows, telling crazy stories about entrepreneurship. But the stories themselves actually have lessons. And the stories themselves are actually somewhat timeless. I've read the book somewhat recently again, and some of it still holds up. The lessons are still there.
You also co-wrote that with your co-host from the show. What was it like moving from being a co-host to writing a book together?
Mia's fine, actually. I once again was developing the beginnings of my writing style, which is I think about something for a long time, and then once I crack open the laptop to write, I go very fast and I commit to the arc of the story, then let someone else tidy up behind me.
Hmm.
Have no time for it. And so having a lawyer read through the story really cleaned up some of the inefficiencies, one might say, when one writes fast and furious like I do.
Now, you have a very long hiatus between this first book, Money Hunt, and the book that we're going to be talking about today. But it seems like you were keeping fairly busy during that time. When did the 14-mile kayak trip come in?
Shortly after the dot-com crash, I was on Long Island Sound with a buddy. I went kayaking for the first time. If you're in that area of the world, it's very beautiful. You gotta look across to Long Island. Like, I wonder if you could, people, I wonder if I could swim there. I wonder if I could kayak there. You certainly can boat across there. It's a very, very large bathtub. And we're talking about it one night, and someone dared us. I'll give you $50 if you can make it. It's like, all right, well, there's your reason. Let's go. And we were such idiots. We packed like 3 or 4 days of food and a cell phone and everything but a camera, right? So we get across the other, again, it's 14 miles. It's sit on top kayaks, no support whatsoever. And we did it. Problem was, upon arriving, there's a bunch of horse flies, by the way. You couldn't even stay on the beach for more than like 3 seconds.
Oof.
We had to turn around and go back. And we didn't really have a picture of anything to prove that we'd been there. Like, I guess we could have brought home a grain of sand from Long Island to analyze it later. But we got back, and as you do, we get to the bar, and we're complaining that this woman that had bet us $50 had stiffed us on the bet. And someone said, "Well, geez, I would have given you 100. I would have given you 250. I would have given you 500 if you did that." Note to self, right? Before we got kicked out of the bar, I'm sure, and thrown in the dumpster. A year later, it's like, "Hey, remember that thing? Yeah, let's do that thing." And we called around. We got 8 guys, and I think we raised 10 grand, and we gave it to the local hospital. Like, wow, all right. And the next year, it's like, "Hey, it's July again." And we had 40 people, and we raised like 40 grand. Of course, we had a party. And I'm like, this is getting good. And long about 2005 or six, GQ magazine called. They said, "Hey, we got a bunch of sponsors. We're thinking of doing a kayak thing. Sounds like you got one already going. Why don't we throw in together?" So, sure. So national press and national media and the Guinness Book of World Records largest simultaneous launch of kayaks. We're like at 400, 450 now in the water, which means chase boats, Coast Guard, float plan, Marine police, and a big party at the end. Now, the funny part about that is, well, perhaps two things. One, I had 500 volunteers by then organizing both the launch and the party, and some 400 kayakers, all of which had to be on the other side of Long Island at 5 o'clock in the morning with the kayak that is assigned to them, and the paddle, and the life vest, and the chase boat, all ready to go. Now it's all volunteer organization, right? So you can't fire anybody. You can't give anybody a bonus yet. Everything has to be ready. So that was a pretty big leadership challenge. Someone at the end of one of those events, we had this feedback loop that was pretty good. Said, why are we kayaking down and then busing ourselves back? Why don't we kayak into the party in Connecticut? Good idea. So we flipped the whole thing. We bussed everybody down at 5 o'clock in the morning. They got in their kayaks and they kayaked into this wonderful grand party with everyone from the Neville brothers to Dickie Betts from Great Southern, the Allman Brothers fame to the Whalers, etc. It was a heck of a party. So at this point, I've totally forgotten what your question was, besides tell me about the kayaks, but I've got 5 minutes out of it, and most of it was true.
Now, have you ever gone back to that woman who did the first $50 bet and said, "Do you see what you have started?"
As a matter of fact, the posters for the event would have her silhouette blacked out, right? It's like, thanks to the mystery better, the $50 that became 500,000. And yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah, we know who it is, but we just didn't ever disclose that. Unless she showed up at the party, we would have put her on stage, but she never did.
How did you go from doing that to trekking in the desert?
Not quite related, but if you go back to Curious, you go back to Adventurer, this is 2004, 2005 now. Money Hunt's winding down. Um, Kayak for a Cause is not quite giant yet. And one of the people that I would kayak with, his name was Wells Jones, and he's an adventurer in his own right. And after 9/11, he and I were just lamenting the fact that we're not really getting any good answers to who, what, why, where, when, right?
Hmm.
Not in the media, not in books, not in anything. But there's this one book, Seven Pillars of Wisdom by T.E. Lawrence, 100 years old. Like, this guy really had an understanding. I'm going to call them the Bedouins, right? These are the nomadic tribes of the region. Really had an understanding of them and was able to bring that back to the West. Turns out he was right about his understanding, but the leaders of the Paris Peace Conference didn't really take him as seriously as they should have. And well, Wells was reading the same book. And he just finished it, and we had the same conclusion. And so we looked at each other and said, what do we do next? Let's go. So we packed up our bags, which was one backpack apiece, and we headed to Amman, Jordan. And just as we were landing, we got an invitation from EO, YEO, Riyadh. They had heard about Money Hunt and the book that we were talking about, and they invited me to give a book talk in Riyadh. Now, there's not a lot of book talks about Western entrepreneurship in Saudi Arabia, let alone Riyadh, but we got the invite. And of course, I said, well, I have a bodyguard, so right, if I bring yes. So Wells was my everybody in Saudi that's anybody has a bodyguard. So I had a bodyguard. And I guess I did okay in my storytelling. I guess they had no way of checking the facts. And I said, wow, that was really good. What else can we do for you? And I said, well, actually, Wells and I would love to hike 1,000 miles from your port town of Jeddah to Damascus, Syria, retracing the steps of T.E. Lawrence and Seven Pillars of Wisdom. And they said, Lawrence, everybody knows Lawrence, even 100 years later.
Hmm.
Well, how can we help? And so they loaded us up with camels and packs and jeeps and a nice little note from the big prince. And away we went. And that began our journey.
Now, how did that experience help you whenever you went to write your current book, A Line in the Sand?
It was the book. I think one thing about A Line in the Sand is it's about strangers in a strange land, whether that's Jules Verne or Arthur Conan Doyle, etc. Most people that read this have never or will never experience that part of the world.
Hmm.
So being there with our feet in the sand for at first 26 days, we've gone back many times since, is research that is 100 times anything you could do in a library, right? And so what we saw, what we ate, what we felt, who we met, where we went was all part of a personal discovery. And we also trained hard and prepared hard for it. So we were able to ingest that information without fear and doubt and really get to a higher level of understanding. Now, the fact that it took me 15 years to write the book is a separate story, but the research by and large was done.
Did you have any starts and stops where you're like, okay, I want to write something, you started this, no, I want to wait? Or did you just decide to wait and then whenever you were done with thinking about it, you sat down and wrote it?
I just ripped it when I was ready. So the busyness that you referred to included two children, one of which is 13 now, one of which is 11, three businesses, about 1,100 employees, all three of which were sold. COVID, which got me off into watercolors and some other funky things that certainly relaxed me and took up some of my time, but they certainly weren't writing a book. But then again, maybe they were, because I believe that doing other things allows you to solve problems that you might be stuck on.
Hmm.
And when it was time, and frankly, the bell rang on October 8th. Now, I don't say October 7th, I say October 8th. October 7th was the first massacre in Gaza, but October 8th was what interested us the most. What now?
Hmm.
What next? And that's the moment I decided it was time to write the book because I had an experience that most people did not. Wells had experiences that most people did not. And here is an opportunity to entertain, inform, and by way of a backdoor, teach important lessons about the region, its culture, its religion, its cuisine, and its importance today. So we wrote the book in 100 days.
Wow. Whenever you think of that experience, what is like the first memory that comes back to you?
Huh. The experience of the book or the journey?
The journey.
There are so many. But upon my deathbed, if I'm asked that question, I would just say rose petal jam.
Okay.
So we can unpack that one. It's a little bit like Rosebud from Citizen Kane.
Yeah, that's the first thing that came to my mind when you said it that way.
So I'm going to unpack it this way. This is Damascus, Syria. Now, that's part of the Levant. Levant has a long history. That long history includes the Crusades
Hmm.
and Templar. And what was built there was basically a pit stop on the way to Jerusalem. And many, many French noblemen decided they'd be saved with the encouragement of the Pope at the time, which was living in Avignon, France. Go to Jerusalem. And by the way, anybody that you slaughter in advance on your way there, you're absolved by me. And the Crusaders took out a lot of Jews and a lot of Arabs on their way to Jerusalem. How many people know that there was equal opportunity slaughter on their
Hmm.
way? So that's the Levant, and that's the 100 years history of France and the Levant. And if you remember, weapons of mass destruction at the UN, remember the shock and awe, or we're going to go get them. Well, It was the French premier, I believe, at the time, Jacques Chirac, great name, who testified versus Colin Powell and said, like, look, guys, your country's 200 years old. You're doing great. But we have 200, if not 2,000 years experience in that region. You don't know what you're getting into. We do. And the French have long held that point of view, especially as it came to Lebanon and Syria. And so when we arrived in Damascus after 26 days in the desert, and we slept in a bed for the first time in a month, had a shower for the first time in a month, had survived checkpoints with guns at our chest and passed by tanks with their turrets tracking us because there was a civil war about to break out again in Syria. We sat down for a breakfast of croissants, hand churned butter, and rose petal jam in Damascus, Syria,
Wow.
at this little bed and breakfast called Biet Al Mamluka, owned by a French woman. And, well, Wells announced that he didn't much like jam, but I insisted that he try some. So I think we housed 12 croissants, two tubs of hand churned butter, and all the rose petal jam we could find. And that was my little piece of France, my reminder that it's a French country, my reminder to everybody that's a French country, and that despite all the strife and the geopolitical maneuvering going on, there's still people that can really cook all throughout the region.
That's incredible.
You asked for one thing, so like that's my one thing. There are many other things, but that's my one thing.
Now, you already have another book scheduled to come out this December.
That is correct. Havana Familia may well beat the deadline. It's effectively done. Wells is going down for a follow-up trip in the next couple of weeks, but may well be out by summer. Interestingly enough, in reading the reviews, which authors do,
Hmm.
of A Line in the Sand, one of my worst reviews was perhaps my best. They call this out for, look, we refer to the characters as the gentlemen. They're clearly white dudes. It's like a adventurer's bromance in the Middle East. And the reviewer was saying, I just felt like I could feel the imperial gaze of two middle-aged white dudes telling me what I should think. And I got to thinking, well, wasn't it middle-aged white dudes in clubs in Paris and London that were drawing the lines in the sand anyways, telling people what they should think, who they should believe in, how they should behave? And by the way, the natural resources underneath your feet, we'll take those and give you 15% of the profits. Just stay there. How many other times has that happened in the world?
Yeah.
Well, Cuba, lacking the natural resources, but definitely having all the attraction, was a great story. The Spanish wanted her, the Americans wanted her, the mobs wanted her, the Russians wanted her, the Venezuelans wanted her. And she's just this, I don't know, innocent, sultry, tropical fruit that just keeps jumping into the hands of the next guy and the next guy and the next guy. What a wonderful story. And so we've said it in 2016. We were there in person when Obama opened it back up after 50 some years. And shortly after that, 18 months, it was closed bang quickly, right? And we all know why.
Hmm.
And it's also set in 1958, 59, which is the transition from the Batista regime to Fidel.
Yeah.
And so the time travel was between those two periods. But the theme is similar. It's the imperial gaze, getting us all into trouble 100 years later.
So now what is next on your horizon?
Well, in terms of being an author, my goal is to get 3 or 5 of these stories done. We're looking at Peru. with Hiram Bingham and the Inca treasures of Machu Picchu, the Philippines, and the third one is the Congo, which once again, the imperial gaze nearly ruined the place. But interestingly enough, the precious metals that I'm making this interview on, my laptop,
Hmm.
my phone, most Teslas, the SpaceX explorations, they're all using the precious metals that are mined out of deep in the Congo.
Hmm.
So, once again, the natural resources are crucial, and getting our hands on it in order to power the growth of the planet seems to be the theme. So, Magnus and Finn will be back in Havana next, but there'll be some other places in the world that have some good stories to be told.
Now, are you doing any active work to try and sell movie rights for these books?
Yeah, I do get that question a lot, which I guess in and of itself is actively trying. They're written in a way that probably wants to be a movie, and I'll answer that call when it comes, but I've not as yet made any proactive moves in that regard.
Just the epic storyline just seems like it would be something that would play out very well on a big screen.
I appreciate that. I tend to agree with you, but at the end of the day, it would be a producer with the ability to greenlight something whose opinion really counts.
True. And somebody who can actually understand and give a good voice to your vision.
Well, when it comes to movies, you sell it and they do what they want. So it's very different on Broadway. The writer controls.
Yeah.
And in the movie business, it's theirs.
Say the person with the money controls. So now this seems like a good time to do our 5 quick questions that never turn out to be quick, but it's just fun to do. Are you ready?
Born ready.
So, question one, what is your favorite sport to play?
You said to play.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll in two ways. One, my favorite sport to watch these days is rugby. I don't play it, but my son does. And so that's the first half of the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Favorite sport to play at the moment, and I'll take some liberties with the word play. Wells and I love to jump out of perfectly good airplanes and land on planet Earth in one piece. So skydiving.
I love that. I've been skydiving once and I want to do it again, but I haven't had the opportunity to go again. But it was like the best experience ever.
A little bit of adrenaline, yeah.
Question two, what was your most memorable experience during your kayaking adventures?
My most memorable experience during my kayaking adventure would be immediately after one of my adventures. I'll tell you why. My hand was nearly frozen into a lobster claw with the fingers, kind of down in that way. Or I really looked like a lobster, and it was for a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason was I had been paddling somewhat incorrectly on a sit on top kayak, which is not a very efficient, it's like a bathtub. Later on, we got good ones. And so, as a living memory of my adventures, I could not eat soup with a spoon
Oh,
for like a week because my hands were so gnarled
wow.
from holding the paddle sort of the wrong way. I've since learned some other techniques where you don't actually have to put your thumb underneath to
Mm-hmm.
hold as you would hold a cylinder. You can actually leave your thumb on the top because remember you're pushing the water.
Yeah.
And so water is the downward force pushing up, and all 5 fingers of your hand are the upward force pushing down. I didn't know that till much later.
Oh, that would be a painful lesson. Okay, question three. This one has a little bit of a explanation for it. Personally, I always think that there's no such thing as failure. Whenever something doesn't work out, you're getting experience and you're learning how to not do it the next time. But what is one of the most memorable experiences that you have had in business that something didn't turn out the way that you wanted it to, but you learned something amazing from it?
Got a lot of those. I'm going to go back to Money Hunt. Again, as we discussed, television show. I had a vision for it that was very commercial and the ability to sell products from it and really monetizing the show itself. And in reality, it took me one lunch with Scott Carlin at Warner Brothers Television in Hollywood to realize that the show wasn't the thing. The show was just the exposure that allowed you to do other things. And so you really had to monetize after the show. And the book was one example of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the lesson learned was just, just sit back and let the universe show you what it wants to do and then double down with effort. Was that a failure? Yeah, it was a shortcoming, a short-sightedness on my part. So I failed to realize my dream, but the dream came out just fine.
I really get that because that's one of the things that I struggle with about how to monetize this podcast. So many people actually charge guests to be on their podcast, and I want this to be more about entertainment journalism with a good journalistic reputation and people to know that I'm going to bring them people to learn about, that I'm doing it from a place that I want to give good facts. It's not about the money. So trying to balance those things out has been a real challenge.
Dianne, keep pure in that regard. There's so many times where Money Hunt could have flipped into pay to play.
Mm-hmm.
It was funny. We'd invite guests on the show and they'd say, like, how much? We'd say, it's nothing. And they were shocked.
Yeah.
Because there are others out there basically selling the time. And that's not journalism. That's just selling time.
Yeah. If I was selling the time, I would be in advertising, not in journalism.
Right. But you will have a more pure audience if you do it like this.
Yes. And that's what's important to me. I want to make sure that I am always seen as somebody who is putting out an honest journalistic product. And that's what's most important.
Amen.
Yeah. Now, question 4. Since you have done so many incredible things in your life, what is something on your bucket list that you plan to check off next?
2 answers. I've been to all 3 of these places, the Nile, Kenya, and Morocco, but I haven't been to them with others that I would like to see those adventures through their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
We have a couple of kids hanging around, an extended family of 6, we call it the Grande Equipe, the big team. And just organizing those calendars is very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to organize that around any one of the trips. And I called one of the erstwhile participants the other day and said, which one would you prefer? And he said, like, that's a no-lose situation. I'll take any one of the 3. I'm down for anything in classic Gen X. So those are ones that I would like to do again and see through someone else's eyes. The one I'd like to do myself, probably with Wells, would be retracing Stanley's route across Africa, 7,000 miles, mostly the Congo.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is the next place that my husband and I have talked about going. We want to go to Africa. And at this point, we're like, anywhere. We don't care. We just want to go. We haven't been to that continent. We want to go there.
It's a good one. It's got a lot going on.
Yeah.
Big one.
Your final question, and I'm asking this of everybody because at the end of the year, we always have a publication that is the year-end book buying guide, which covers every author that we've talked to for this season of the podcast. And this year, I'm creating a list of recommendations of other authors from the authors that we talked to. So question 5 is, whenever somebody asks you what book they should read, who is the author that you always suggest?
I'm going to give a multi-point answer.
Most people do.
Great. So because we've been talking about it so much, if one wants to understand A Line in the Sand or the Middle East, one must read Seven Pillars of Wisdom by T.E. Lawrence. It's 100 years old, and you'd be shocked at how relevant it is today. Having said that, my three personally favorite books would be Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey,
Mm-hmm.
Flow, which is the Science of Happiness by, get this, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I think I said it right. And the third one would be Letting Go, which is the science of personal optimization and a trick for getting to sleep.
Oh, I
And
could use that one.
it was called Letting Go. I think the author is Winter, but don't quote me on that. I know the book jacket is yellow.
Let's go ahead and remind everybody who you are and the titles of your books.
Well, I'm Miles Spencer. My most recent book is A Line in the Sand, although perhaps by the time this is out, you might also look into Havana Familia. Same series, same characters. And then way back in the Wayback Machine, there's a book called Money Hunt 27 Rules, which was written during .com.
And it still is available on Amazon.
I find amazing, but
Now, where can they find information on you?
certainly Amazon's one place to start. That's where we sell all of our books, but I blog quite frequently at milesspencer.com. That's two S's in the middle. Name of the blog is Miles to Go. But yeah, you put my name into the Google machine and you got lots to see.
So now, what's the Hold My Beer?
Eh, you know, they're my heroes. They're people that basically have said at one time or another, I can do that. And that could be clearing a rack of 9 ball in a hotel lobby while everybody's looking, to Tom Brady being down, I think 27-3 at halftime to the Atlanta Falcons. And this is like, just hold on for a second, hold my beer. There are Alex Honnold, who was the first one to free solo El Capitan. You can look it up. I would not do that. And one woman, I love this, who parachuted into occupied France during the Second World War and would tempt Nazi soldiers with her charms to go for a walk in the woods where she would slaughter them and go back for another. She accounted for like 40 or 50 assassinations.
I was perusing through this today, and you have got some great stories in your Hold My Beer information.
Thank you. They're other people's stories, but I'm just making sure they stay alive.
So definitely everybody needs to go to milesspencer.com and check all of these out because you've got a great website with so much incredible information.
Thank you.
And not to mention, you have a store on there as well.
I do. That's my son, his money grubbing efforts. I do all the hard work of finding things of architectural or landscape interest, mostly in Europe, and I sketch them and I watercolor them and I inventory them and I put them up on the site. He gets an order, he walks down to the framer, picks it up a day later, slaps a label on it, and walks it over to the post office and gets 20% for it. And I'm thinking of renegotiating the deal.
I was going to say, I think he learned well from you. One of the things that I really love about your website is that you call it Miles to Go. And then your tagline on there, I mentor 2 kids and several founders. Similarities are coincidental.
It is true. I'm thinking of, yeah, my LinkedIn actually says results vary, which is another way of getting to the same thing. But yeah, I do a lot of things. I try a lot of things, and results vary, and similarities are coincidental.
So, well, I think everybody needs to go there and check these out and go to Amazon and buy your book.
Can't argue with either one.
Thank you so much for being here with me today and having this conversation. You are absolutely fascinating to talk to. I know we could probably talk for like 3 hours, not even begin to cover all the stuff that you have done.
I think you're right. It's been my pleasure, Diane. Thank you.
So there you have it, my interview with the incredible Miles Spencer. Be sure to go to his website as soon as you possibly can and check out everything that this man has got going on in his life. It is truly inspiring. You will be amazed at everything that he has done and planning to do in the future. And you should definitely go check out his book, A Line in the Sand. It is currently setting in the top 10 in 3 separate categories on Amazon right now. It is number 4 in Jordan history, number 6 in the history of Saudi Arabia, and number 8 in the history of Syria. I've been watching this one, and it has been sitting in the top 20 for quite a while. So that tells you people are really enjoying this book. So make sure that you're one of them, because you do not want to miss out. Now, next week, we have another fantastic treat. We're going to be talking to Joel Shulkin, MD, who happens to write medical thrillers. There's nothing better than when you get to read a medical thriller actually written by a doctor. It's one of my favorite things. Joel has already written several books, including the adverse effects and toxic effects that are part of his Memory Thieves series. But we focus mainly on his new book, a forensic techno-thriller called Heroic Measures. This book follows Armed Forces medical examiner Stephen Englehart as his past traumas resurface when a unalived soldier awakens on the autopsy table. If that doesn't pique your interest, I really don't know what would. So be sure to come back next Wednesday when we will be joined with Joel Shulkin, MD. And while you're waiting, go read A Line in the Sand. You will not regret it. We're going to go ahead and cut it off right here because I have got so much to do. We've been traveling on the weekends and I'm trying to play catch up on a lot of things here. So I have got a lot of work to do in a very short amount of time. So you know what time it is, folks. It's time for you all to go forth and be really happy.